Welcome to the Frontlines of Leadership podcast, where my guests tell stories and share principles to inspire the rising generation of leaders. Today, I'm honored to welcome Joe Byerly to the Frontlines of Leadership podcast. Joe is a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel with over 20 years of service, including combat deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan and command of a cavalry squadron in Europe. Over the course of his career, Joe received several awards and recognitions, including multiple Legion of Merits, Bronze Stars, the Purple Heart, and the General Douglas MacArthur Leadership Award. He is the founder of From the Green Notebook, a widely respected leadership platform dedicated to helping leaders grow through reflection, reading, and writing. Joe is also the author of the Leader's 90-Day Notebook and co-author of My Green Notebook, Know Thyself Before Changing Jobs. Throughout his career and beyond, Joe has written for publications like Army Magazine, Military Review, Foreign Policy, and Strategy Bridge, and his leadership insights have been featured by outlets like Forbes and Ryan Holiday's Daily Stoic Leadership course. Joe, it's an honor to have you on the show. Hey, Joe, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's great to have you today.
Jackson, thank you so much for inviting me, man. And it's you're building a really great show here.
Thank you. Ever since I've started and talking to my network with, my dad and his network in the Army, you were someone that came up that, him and I thought that would be a really good guest on here. And as I've listened to your content on From the Green Notebook, it's been really exciting, and I've been really excited to have you on. But we'll just jump in if that's all right.
Let's go, man.
Sweet. So first question that I always ask on so far in my episodes, and something that I really want to focus on in the podcast, is real stories about real leaders in your life. So first question is, who is one of the greatest leaders you've had in your life, and what leadership attributes did they possess that made their leadership stand out to you?
Well, real quick, you said something really important there. You said leader attributes, right? Like, so leadership is all about behaviors. When it comes down to it, like, what is a person actually doing to influence an organization? And so, I'm going to tell you that, like, I pay attention to that more than the person. So I can sit here and tell you like different things I've picked up along people along the way, and then tried it on for myself. I've been like, this works for me. This meshes with who I am as a leader and as an individual, and this works really well for this organization. But yeah, and I'm not going to mention names, but there's two individuals in particular, and their leadership styles were very similar to each other. And the two things that they really showed me, and I'll say like show instead of like taught me, because they did it through example, which I think is one of the most important things you can do as a leader is like lead and teach by example instead of just talking at folks. But the two things they showed me was communication and presence. They put those two things above everything else. And one person in particular, at senior levels, whether it's you're a 4-star general or a senior executive at a Fortune 500 company, right? You're in charge of a lot of people. You get a ton of emails. And I think like people don't really realize it as you're climbing the organization. We're like, oh man, I got like 30 emails today.
Right.
Multiply that by 50. And that's
Right.
what like the senior folks are getting. But this one commander, he would read the email. I mean, and this was like, so many people that was like would like receive this email, but he would read this email every single day. It was pages and pages and pages. But he knew that once he hit reply all and wrote his notes in that email, like the observations he had on the reporting that people were sending up, and essentially this was in Afghanistan, and this was a an email that summarized everything that was happening in country, what the coalition was doing.
Right.
And he would write little comments, little notes. Maybe it was a sentence, maybe it was a question, but he did that every single day. And so he was able to communicate to so many people every single day just by that like one little action. Another thing, he would have what's called an operations and intelligence update 3 times a week, and everybody tuned into it. Again, valuing communication. He would fly all over the country and speak directly to soldiers and leaders. Again, valuing communication. The other one, same thing. He would get up every single morning in 82nd Airborne Division and do physical fitness with groups from all over the division. And he would communicate during that time, but he was also showing his presence. Same with the general in Afghanistan, traveling all over the country, being where the points of friction were at. And so, when I finally jumped into a leadership position after working for those two gentlemen, I found myself valuing communication, valuing presence. And so every single morning I was doing physical fitness with a
Mm,
group of soldiers, and, just working out with them, talking to them, telling them, my philosophy and where the organization was going. And I got a term, and I don't remember where I heard it from, but it was like the leader is the chief reminding officer of
mm,
the organization. And that's the person who reminds, why we're here, what we're doing, what's coming up. And you just keep saying it over and over and over again, to the point where you're like getting sick.
right.
You're like, man, I'm a parrot. I'm just repeating myself right now. But I think like those two things are really important for leaders, especially the higher up you go, because it helps keep you connected to the organization and the people, and it helps the people see that there's like a human actually leading it.
Right. I really like those two principles, communication and presence. I can imagine looking at those two great leaders that you've mentioned. I'm trying to picture what would happen if the opposite was to take place, if they didn't communicate well and if they didn't have presence, whether that's with soldiers or employees in an organization.
Well,
And go ahead.
yeah, no, like that's actually a really good point that you bring up, Jackson. Is like a lot of times we crave to work for the greatest leaders ever, and
Mm,
those people shape us. But did you know who else shaped me? Some of the worst leaders
right.
I ever worked for, who were doing the exact opposite of
Mm,
what I said. They stayed in their office instead of getting out and visiting and talking with people. They treated people like objects instead of
mm,
human beings. And so what I found was when I went into command, not only was I taking like the example of the greatest leaders I saw, but I was also taking those really horrible, like the people that like you get the Sunday scaries
mm,
working for, or you're just like, man, like I hate going to work. I hate my life. Like those people became powerful examples for me of like who I don't want to be as
right.
a commander.
Yeah, and I think it just takes a learning mindset of always observing. And then something I want to ask you next, kind of jumping off your story, you mentioned those two principles, and then the leader being the chief reminding officer, and you kind of filled that role as well when you took command and became a leader in a leadership position. What does that look like, and how can someone, obviously, this podcast, the subtitle being it's stories to inspire the rising generation of leaders. And so people that, are my age or younger and are in a position trying to become better leaders, how can someone understand, or maybe they take communication and presence from a great leader or a bad leader? How do they apply those things? Like you mentioned you took them and then applied them in your own leadership. What does that look like for somebody to not only learn it but then apply it?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing that you bring up. Um, like when like I'll just back up a little bit. Like when you finally got into your first role of leadership role, whether it was like an organization at BYU or it's something that you're doing now. Like who were the examples that you went back and looked at to pull into those positions? Like I'm asking you, like
Yeah,
who were
yeah.
who were some of the folks?
Well, I mean, the people that I seem to always look back to are my coaches
Yeah.
and my professors, and then ultimately, my parents that have raised me from the beginning.
Yeah, it's awesome. So like you have this like very small subset, like this small subset of people that like you're like, okay, I saw this, I saw this, I saw this. I'm gonna bring this in and you're gonna try this on. And then like over the course of your career too, you're gonna see more things and you're gonna implement them. And some things are gonna work, and some things you're gonna be like, oh man, that was amazing. And then you're gonna do it, and it just doesn't feel like Jackson. It just feels
Mhm.
like you're putting on a mask. And so I think it's really important to just like kind of like pump your brain full of examples, like something you used to have back in the day. Your dad would know. It's called a jukebox.
Yeah,
That had like a bunch of songs just like stacked into it. And so like right behind me are a ton of books.
right.
And so how you're like what 20, probably what 24, 25 right now?
25. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So when I was 30, so you're already ahead of me because I'm giving you this advice like right
Thank you.
now. But like when I was like 30, early 30s, I was like, man, like all these books behind me, I could start diving into them and pulling out examples of people who I admire. So like, I was telling you those stories, but like there was a guy I read about in the 1800s who, like he inspired his men by presence, and he would, like, he would do the right. He knew what the higher mission was, even if he didn't agree with his boss. And there was like one story where it was a great naval battle. It was the English versus the French, and his boss, like the flagship, raised a flag saying like, "Hey, like ceasefire, ceasefire," and his guys are yelling at him like, "Hey, sir, they're saying ceasefire, we got to stop." And he knew he knew they were on the cusp of victory. And so he like, he supposedly told his guys like, "Hey," because he was missing an eye. He's like, "I only have one good eye and it's focused on the enemy right now. Keep
Like,
firing." And the guy's name was Horatio Nelson, and he ended up defeating the French in that battle. But like, I learned about him in my early 30s, and I was like, that's the type of guy I want to be when I'm a commander. If I know the right thing, I'm gonna live by that value and just push towards it. So I'm not answering your question at all, Jackson. I'm just saying, like, don't rely on just those examples of your coaches, your parents, your professors, like, and the people, your bosses now. Like, keep filling your brain with
mm,
all these people that have been leading organizations well before you or I were born, and just
right.
pull bits and pieces of it out, try it on, and you're like, man, this fits with my personality, run with it. But if you find yourself in a position where you're like, man, this feels like clunky, this isn't working, this isn't me, then like discard it. And that's the other thing is like there's been great leaders who have done things, and that's just not me.
Mm-hmm.
And I've quickly gotten rid of it when I felt like that, that role or that mask or whatever that I was wearing was just wearing me down.
Right. And I think to apply that to like a young person trying to grow in the leadership and becoming a great leader, it's not getting stuck in a mold and finding your own identity. Like you're saying, one of the biggest things I've learned in my interviews so far on my podcast is people are telling me some of their greatest examples are President Kennedy or President Lincoln or General Grant, whoever it is, all these people from history that obviously I've never met, but they read about them. And so like truly becoming understanding your identity and not getting stuck in that mold, I think is a principle I'm taking from you as well. And I really enjoy that.
Yeah, and what's interesting too, man, is like, you may be in charge of a small team now, like 5 or 6 people, and it's going to require different skills and attributes and a way of leading that's different if you have a team of 20 people, if you have a
Mm,
team of 500 people, if you have a team of 30,000 people.
right.
And so again, it's constantly learning, trying things on, but also recognizing what your organization needs and applying that to it as well. And again, like if you were talking about the jukebox, if you have a bunch of leadership skill sets, like kind of like in the back of your brain,
Mm,
from huge organizational level leaders to tactical leaders, as you climb the ladder, you can start pulling bits and pieces of those songs out and trying them out in the organization. But if you were to right now take what you have and lock that in and be like, this is how I'm going to lead for the rest of my life, and you're a 35, 40-year-old version of Jackson Taylor, and you're in charge of a much larger organization, I promise you right now, you're going to fail.
right.
And so you gotta grow and you gotta adapt as you get more authority and responsibility in any organization.
Yeah. You've really got me thinking, not wanting to be 40, but also what leadership principles I need
There's
to grow.
nothing wrong with being 40, man. I'm telling you right now. Much better at 40 than I was at 25
Yeah.
by far.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, kind of jumping in, backpacking off of talking about one of the principles you mentioned, communication. And I want to kind of jump into kind of your backstory and what you're doing now and how from the Green Notebook came about. Talking about these leadership principles, learning them from leaders, trying to apply them. You obviously had to write those things down, and you kind of your platform, from what I understand, somewhat came from that. And so I'm interested to know, why did you go down the path of leadership development and getting into, from the Green Notebook?
Yeah, there was I mean, like, I guess like that answer is pretty complex, but it was really interesting. Simon Sinek has like a course he offered on his website that a senior leader in 2014 asked me to check out. And but what it was like finding your why. And one of the exercises in there is Simon said, or the exercise is basically, chart like 5 of your highest moments as a high schooler kid, 5 of your highest moments as a professional, and then do that as, in the lowest moments. And what's really interesting is I did that, and the one like thread that connected all of those was that leadership. Like if if I had a moment of failure when I was a high schooler or younger, it was because somebody failed me, like a leader, a coach, somebody failed me, or I failed myself. And then in my professional capacity, like working for a horrible leader, made my life miserable. But then when I looked at like my highlights, it was when I led myself really well, or I was in a position of leadership affecting and influencing other people. And so I was like, oh man, like this is why I do stuff. And so, part of the thing was like developing a why statement. And mine was to help others lead with the best version of themselves, because I found that throughout my career, anytime I messed up, instead of just like sitting in it, I would turn around and try to help other people not do the same thing I did. And kind of the way I've operated forever is I will touch the stove and then I'll come tell you, Jackson, that the stove is hot.
Yeah.
Um, and so like I had like all these things that I wish I could have done better. And so I would just pass those on to the people behind me. And so I did some stuff when I was younger, but then in 2013, I did some writing online when I was younger, but then in like 2013, I was working on a project for the Army on a self-study program. And I was really frustrated by how clunky the Army systems were. It was like miserable. Like we didn't have a budget. I was getting so frustrated. And then I saw that I could go on WordPress, set up a website myself, and what
Mm.
would take weeks working within the bureaucracy of the Army, I could do like in 5 minutes. I started a blog. It was called From the Green Notebook. And for your listeners who aren't familiar with it, a green notebook is an Army issued notebook for taking notes in meetings, your to-do list, your lessons learned. And so I was like, man, like I want to share lessons from my green notebook.
Yeah.
And I have a stack of notebooks like that's like right over here off camera. And I have one from 2012 when I started actually taking my notebook seriously and jotting down things I heard that I thought were really, I was like, oh, that's good advice. And
Yeah.
things that I read in books. And I was like, oh, that's really good advice. And I found myself going back to it time and time again. And it's crazy, man. There's notebooks all over this office right now of quotes and lessons. And so, my idea was that like instead of it dying in my notebook, I could share it with other people. And then other people started coming along over the years, like all over our military, our allies, submitting posts. And so it's been really cool. I think we've published over 1,000 posts. We've had over 5 million views. And we've really been able to take people's green notebooks and share the wealth of knowledge that's in them. So that's like a very rough version of the origin story.
Yeah, that's amazing. And thank you for being willing to share it. I hope my listeners will then, now go and be interested in From the Green Notebook and checking it out. And one of the things that I think is most amazing from it is what you mentioned, and I was going to chime in, but I wanted to let you finish, is that you didn't let it die with you. And then now just that one notion of sharing it with other people in the Army and in your life, now you have thousands and thousands of posts, so many notebooks of other people coming in, and it's just grown on each other. So I think that's amazing.
And what's wild is like I didn't do it for any other reason except the reason I was telling you that's why I did it.
Yeah.
And it opened up so many opportunities for me like later in my career, that I could have never imagined. Like I've had tea in Buckingham Palace. I've jumped waves in the Indian Ocean. I got to compete against your dad every week, in a physical fitness competition in Afghanistan. And it all came from writing. Even now, like I've been out of the military for a year and a half, and the job I do every single day is a direct growth up from the Green Notebook. So, if you find something you're passionate about, you never know, man. Like you could be getting your own show here, on like some major network, 10, 15 years down the road. But yeah, that was the purpose of it. That was all. And it ended up giving back way more,
Yeah.
I felt that than I gave it over the course of the years.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's what I hope, this show wasn't, from the front lines of leadership, my podcast, the whole goal is that I wanted to learn from other leaders and I wanted to learn principles. If, like I mentioned to you before we started, if not another soul listens to an episode, I at least will learn and strive to become a better leader from my guests, regardless. So I think that's amazing.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah. Well, kind of jumping into another question I wanted to ask you, something for, my generation or younger is whether they're in the business world or, getting out of college, trying to find a job or whatever it is, maybe someone hasn't had a ton of leadership opportunity or experience, and they probably may not be even in a leadership role. They might be a solo contributor or whatever it is in an organization. Maybe you could speak to us a little bit about how leadership, although certain positions do come with leadership responsibility. How can someone grow into a better leader and grow their influence, even if they might not be in a leadership position?
Well, you just said it like in your answer, and it's something you talk about too. Is it at the end of the day, leadership is just influence. That's all it is. And so if you are in an organization where you're not in charge of anybody, but you're influencing the people around you by either your work ethic, or you're in a briefing and you're making recommendations to the boss,
Mm,
or you're coming up with an innovative way to do something that hasn't been done before, you are a leader. And I think a lot of people take that for granted. They're like, oh, well, I'm not in charge of anybody, I'm not a leader. You are a leader.
mm,
um, and so I think like that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, again, I'll keep bringing it back to this, is like, keep preparing for leadership roles. And that comes down to reading. And so, in your free time, take time every day, just read 10-15 minutes a day. Because that is one leadership practice. That is one practice that I did that really changed how I led. And then, you can be better in those positions. And then when the time opportunity opens up for you and somebody taps you on the shoulder and is like, hey, Jackson, been watching what you're doing. I'd like for you now to move up to this next position and be in charge of, 5, 6, 7 direct reports or 20 direct reports, whatever, something crazy like that. You're ready to go. Like you've been preparing, you've been taking the time to do things as a solo person. You've been observing, you've been changing, you've been adapting, and then you've been preparing for it, through your reading and reflection.
yeah. I like that personally for me because sometimes, just graduating college, being in my first role, working for a software consulting firm, being a solo contributor, there's you may not see that I have any direct reports or anything like that, but really understanding, okay, when I do have that opportunity, jumping on it. And it's something I like to look back onto in sports, like in high school sports or anybody who played sports college or whatever level. There always seemed to be a captain, on the team. There's always a designated captain. And sometimes that came from the coach, but a lot of times that came from team members appointing the captain. And I feel like in that situation where the captain, the leader was chosen by team members, not from some higher authority from somewhere, it always seemed to work out better. And they related to that leader and wanted to follow them rather than being forced to because of a position in that role.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. That's a really great point. And I think, that, and I've seen the same thing in the military, 20 years. Like, there was usually one person in an organization. They may not be the commander, they may not be the top non-commissioned officer, but like, when stuff hit the fan, everybody looked to that one person like, hey, what do I do now?
Right.
And they didn't ask it. They were like looking physically at what they were doing by their example and would just follow along. Same thing I'm sure you saw in the locker rooms and the athletic fields coming up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And it's just, it's not even like you're saying, it's not even like they were assigned or anything. People just naturally, there's this tendency to look to who you trust. And that's the leader like that. Whether you like it or not, that person you trust and who you look to is the leader. Um, and it's a crazy dynamic, but it's just how it goes. Seems to be
Yeah.
how it goes. Yeah. Well, moving into another section, I wanted to ask you about talking to young leaders. In your experience, where do you see, what do you see young leaders that are coming up, whether that was in the army or in your work now, that they're doing well, and where maybe young leaders tend to struggle, and where we might be able to improve?
Yeah, I'd say it's two things. Like, one is, it's like really hard when you're in a position of leadership and you're just out of college,
Mm,
especially in the army, because a lot of the people you're in charge of are either older than you
yeah.
or they're the same age as you. And I think it's very natural for a lot of people to want to be liked.
Mm,
And so that was something I struggled with very early on in my military career. And I watched more junior leaders struggle with that too. And so, one of the things that I began to focus on is less about being liked and more about being respected. And you can not focus on being liked, but still be likable.
Mm.
I think is like really important. So I wasn't, trying to be rude or, drive people and not be respectful to them, but I wasn't worried about it. At the end of the day, I just wanted to do right by the organization and right by the individual. So I'd say that's the first thing. And you got to get past it. And I think one way to that, younger folks can, younger leaders can get past this is I look at like leadership. Every leadership comes with almost like an actor, right? Like it comes with costumes, it comes with like a script, a role, behaviors, like if you think like, hey, if you're the king in a movie, or you're the homeless guy in a movie, you're going to act a certain way, you're going to dress a certain way. So I think like one of the things that I always remembered was that leadership is about a position too. Like if you're in a formal position of leadership, you've got to play that role, you got to play the part. And so when I would, over time, and this wasn't something I did when I was younger, but as I got older, I realized, hey, I'm playing a part right now, and I got to do that to the best of my ability. And so, if I was in charge of an organization of 500 people, and they were always looking to me, I kept that in the back of my mind. I'm playing a part right now. And, there were the times where I would be like, okay, like me personally, what would I do? And that's not necessarily what the commander of this organization should do.
Mm.
And so that's kind of where I would gravitate towards whenever there was a diversion. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, I think, and it's natural, like, and it's not like a generational thing. I think stress is real and anxiety is real, and things that may stress you out, won't even keep me up at night. Like I'll be sleeping soundly while you're like, staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. freaked out. And so just know that like that's a natural progression. Like you have to go through those really crappy late night ruminations and all those things to get to a point where like your stress tolerance goes up, and all of a sudden you find yourself in situations that would have freaked a younger version of you out, and it doesn't freak you out anymore. So you got to be like comfortable with being uncomfortable, and that took me a while to figure out too. Like I wanted the stress to go away, I wanted the discomfort to go away, but I needed to experience that stuff almost like an inoculation for those future experiences.
Yeah. I want to go back to the first one you mentioned, you know, you playing a role, in any movie you mentioned the costume or you're playing a role as an actor. As a leader, it's the same way. You're filling this position and you have to act the right way and lead in a certain way to make sure the success of the organization and the mission it goes through. It reminds me what we talked about earlier, though, about identity, where, something that someone does as a leader may not be what really works for you. And so I'm trying to think how you can mesh those two is you're filling a role and you're without not being true to yourself, but still fulfilling that position, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I got a great example. So I once had a leader who like I'll give you an example, like actually very quickly. So if you think about it, like the position, like as a leader and you're in charge of people, you are in like an objectified role. Like you're not Jackson Taylor, you're the manager, Jackson Taylor.
Mm.
And so, like if I'm working for you and you come in one day and you just start like making fun of me,
Right.
that's what Jackson would do. But the manager, Jackson Taylor, doing that has a completely different impact
Mm.
on me. Like I'm actually like, man, Jackson hates me. Like I
Yeah.
don't know what I did today. Or you're having a bad day, right? Like, you got in an argument with your wife on the way to work. You're just in a bad mood. You didn't sleep well last night because you were staying up at 2 a.m. staring at the ceiling. And all of a sudden, like you're not talking to anybody and you're just like mean mugging folks as you're going to your desk. Now I'm like, man, Jackson, the manager, God, I don't know like what I'm doing wrong, but he just looked at me, didn't even say hi. Like he hates me. Like things like that
Yeah,
happens
that makes
all the
sense.
time in an organization. And so like, I could be authentic to myself, but also I have to like kind of curb some of my behaviors. Like I have to recognize that like I'm in charge. So a joke doesn't land, or, a bad day doesn't land the same as it would if I was just a regular person. And I think a lot of people miss that when they get into positions of leadership. Like in your mind, you're Jackson. In my mind, I'm Joe. But no, you're playing a role.
Mm.
You're the commander, and there's things that you have to do that you may necessarily not want to do, but you've got to. Like, I hate meetings, but I had to go to meetings. I like struggled to pay attention. I would rather be on my phone scrolling through Instagram reels. But no, I have to sit in the meeting and pay attention because that's what the commander is expected to do.
Yeah. Now that makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad you shared that like you have responsibility and how you act is now directly impacts the people that you're responsible for. So that makes total sense. I'm glad you shared that. One thing I want to move into is kind of your younger self. If you were in a position like me, you're my age, what advice would you give to your younger self about leadership? And I'm kind of tying two questions together. Both, what advice would you give yourself about leadership as a younger person, and what does leadership mean differently to you today versus back then?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say like, early on, I would again like going back to the roles thing, like, hey man, you're playing a role, and like just like an actor like wouldn't wait till the last minute to like read the script right before they go in and film a scene. Like you don't want to show up empty-handed and just wing it. So,
Mhm.
for me, reading. And I'm gonna just keep hitting it over. See, the
No,
chief
yeah.
commanding officer, man, I'm just hitting it over and over again. But reading is so important. Like, and not just reading like nonfiction leadership books, but like reading biographies. Like biographies are a great way to learn from the stories of other people, and then also to hold a mirror up to yourself.
Mhm.
You're gonna see things in biographies, and you're like, man, like that doesn't sit well with me. Why doesn't it sit well with me? That's something that like I have within myself that I'm wrestling with. I need to focus on that, So biographies are a great way to hold up a mirror. Fiction is a great way to develop empathy because you're like the story is like literally like a simulator for your emotion. So as you're like going through, you're like, man, like this, I'm feeling down right now because this person just had a death in the family, So like if similar things like that happen, like you can have a little bit more empathy as a leader. So that's one, is reading and preparation. Two is reflection, man. I really wish I didn't start journaling till 2021. So I was what, like late 30s at that time. And I had all these experiences when I was younger that I could have learned from. And journaling is a great way to kind of hold a mirror again, but like hold a mirror up to your day and like, hey, where did I do well? Where did I fail? Where could I have done better? What am I grateful for? What am I struggling with? What did I learn? And as you write that stuff down, man, it does something. Like you can start seeing those patterns that you have. You're like, man, every job I've taken, I keep running into these horrible people that do these things. Well, if you were to journal and you were to look at, oh man, like I keep having the same problems over and over again, no matter what job I'm at, no matter who the people are. What do you think that would tell you as an individual? Do you think it's the other people, or do you think it's you? There's something within yourself that you need to work on.
Right.
And so those are things that like you discover only through taking the time every day to write it down. So that is one thing that I wish I would have done when I was a lot younger, because I could have continued to tweak my approach to leadership, and the skills and attributes I needed way earlier in my career. And then, have a record of those experiences too, that like all of a sudden like, here's an example. I kept my notebook in 2012, and I had been in the army at that time for 8 years. And um, and so I have this snapshot of what it was like being in an organization only 8 years in. And then when I'm a commander, I've already forgotten all those things. I've been in for 18 years. I've had a lot of experiences. I forget what it was like to be in an organization, for only 8 years. So I was able to go back in my notebook of notes and observations I was keeping and able to take a look back at that version of myself and see the things that I thought were important or the things that pissed me off.
Yeah.
And it really helped put, me in the mindset of somebody there. So I mean, there's so many benefits, man, for leaders to gain just through journaling.
Yeah. I'm really glad you said those two because those are two things, reading and journaling that I've always wanted to be better at. And I'm not very good at either of them. I used to journal and I'd last a week, writing my journal. And I read several books that are some of my favorite books, but I struggle to read every day. And so I'm really gonna actually try to commit to those two things. And it's hard, but I'm glad you said those two because
Uh,
they're so
I'll
simple, but it's like they're so hard. And so,
Yeah. So I'll give you two pieces of advice.
okay.
One, there's like formatting. Like I think that's important. I think if a lot of times we stare at the blank page and we're like, where do we begin?
Mhm.
And so it's a lot easier to fill something out. So I created something you can find on Amazon called the Leader's 90-Day Notebook. And
Okay.
it's the same journaling format I use. It's like how many hours of sleep did I get last night? What did I do, physically today? What decisions did I make? And what's really cool is you just go through, fill it out, takes maybe 10 minutes.
Mhm.
Do it for like, and it's 90 days, but like just do it for a month and go back to the beginning of the month. And you kind of like, oh man, like I have a really good record of, the things that I've been doing for the last month in the areas of growth and gratitude and all those things. So that's one.
Okay.
Two, I used to read 5 books a year, if that. And like at the time I was reading like that, like the Harry Potter series was coming out. So at least one of those was a Harry Potter book. And now I read 45 to 50 books a year.
Wow.
And I have something, I have like right next to my chair. I get up every morning, I have a stack, and it's like a bunch of different books, like maybe a fiction book, maybe a leadership book, maybe a memoir, maybe a biography, something like that. And I will start reading one and I just commit to like 15, 20 minutes. Start reading one. And as soon as your mind starts wandering, put it down and go to the next one and start reading it, and highlight and take notes and all those things. And then as soon as your mind starts wandering, go to the next one. It's like crop rotation. But like what I found is in doing that, like one of those like books that don't really interest me, but there are a lot of valuable lessons in there. I will finish it. It may take me 6, 7 months, reading 2 or 3 pages a day, but I'll finish it.
Mhm.
But then I'm also including all these other books in there too. So it really helps me continue the practice of reading. Otherwise, if there's a book you're reading and you're like, okay, like this is a dry part, you're going to find yourself making excuses, not to go back and pick it up again.
Yeah.
And so by doing that, you're actually using the full 20 minutes every single morning to read. And then you are, making headway across multiple books at the same time.
Yeah. These are awesome, Joe. I always say there's these golden nuggets that I take out of all of these podcasts I do, and this is heat that I need to help
Good,
me.
man.
So
Well, it's only good, Jackson, if you start doing it. Otherwise, it's
that's right.
it's useless. Yeah.
Well, that's super helpful though, because like I said, like I really want to do it, but I struggle to do it. So that's really good, actual practical advice to be able to apply. So I'm definitely going to try that. Well, Joe, you've been amazing and given such great advice personally for me, and I hope to those listening. Before I wrap up, I just want to say thank you so much again for coming on and being willing to share your experience and all your advice with us.
Hey, man, thank you so much for inviting me. Again, this is awesome. You're doing this at 25. I didn't start the podcast until almost 6 years ago. So I was like 38. So you were like well ahead of me on your path to becoming a great leader. So continue doing it, man, and keep it up. Thank you so much, Jackson.
Yep, thank you. Appreciate you, Joe.
All right, bud.
Thank you for spending time with us on the Front Lines of Leadership podcast. Leadership isn't about the position you hold, it's about the responsibility you accept and the people you serve. Take a moment to reflect on one principle from today's conversation that you can apply immediately, at work, at home, or in your community. Small, intentional actions compound into real leadership. Subscribe, share, and join us again as we continue to learn from leaders who show us what it means to lead from the front lines.